Okay, I think we're ready to start again. So if everyone can find their places, we're ready to start our next session of the day. So for this next session, we have our four sister projects that will each present some of the exciting work we are working on. So as you know from the morning, we are four sister projects, Equitas, Bias, Find HR, and Mammoth, that constitutes this cluster. And I have the privilege to open this part of the session with a presentation of the Bias project that I am leading. So my name is Søraa. I'm a professor in Science and Technology Studies at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and I'm the PI of the Bias project, and we'll talk to you about how we can situate fairness based on the knowledge we have from this project. So if everyone finds their places, we're ready to begin. Some of you might have been here yesterday, some of you are maybe joining us online, but for those of you who don't really know the Bias project from before, it's funded from the European Union's Horizon Europe program under Pillar 2 Cluster 4, as with all the three other projects. What distinguishes us from the three other projects is that we are led by the humanities faculty, which is quite rare in these more technical clusters. But we do have good technical partners we are working with, of course, but we really try to bring humanities and social science perspectives into these projects as well. Our project is also 1 year longer than the other projects, so we are a bit over halfway there. So the other projects might have a bit more cutting-edge results than we have today, but I will still share with you some of our preliminary results. So Bias constitutes a project of 9 partners from all corners of Europe. We are represented here today with our 4 scientific partners, NTNU in Norway, University of Iceland, Leiden University in the Netherlands, and Bern University of Applied Sciences in Switzerland. And as you can see, we are a project with all corners of Europe and also many countries outside of the European Union, which I personally find very exciting, because then we can figure out what happens in the Union and also how does that translate to countries that are also outside of the EU currently. So the project mission of Bias is to empower the AI and human research community. And we do this by addressing and mitigating AI biases. And during these 2 days, you have heard a lot about AI biases and how we can potentially mitigate them. So I'm not going to go into the very basics of that. But in our project, we have a socio-technical interdisciplinary approach on how we can understand the job-seeking process. So we really try to see quite a lot of sides of what does it mean to apply for a job, how does technology play a role in that, what are the expertise of HR personnel, AI developers, and also the job seeker who might be the lucky one who gets a job in the end. So when we look at the history of the human job-seeking experience, we know that humans discriminate quite a lot when hiring based on age, gender, race, class. We have seen multiple examples of that during these 2 days. I'm not going to go through all the examples that exist, of course, but if you look at the Bias website, we have multiple examples there. Here is one from Norway, where I am based, where we have long studies showing that if you have a non-Norwegian sounding last name, you have a much less chance of being called in for an interview. So several people are changing their names in order to be called in for an interview in the first place. But yeah, multiple examples of human-based discrimination exists, of course. What we are seeing quite alarmingly, though, is that AI is being increasingly used for recruitment, both on finding, screening, and assessing candidates. And of course, as we heard a bit earlier today, we can have very good, well-meaning thoughts about employing a technology. For every one of you who have been involved in a hiring process, you might see that if you get 100 or 1,000 candidates applying for a job, it takes quite a lot of time to go through just to assess are people eligible in the first place to apply for that. So, of course, the goal behind using AI for hiring and recruitment is to save some time, make it a bit more efficient, but we have to be really careful when we do that so that we don't lead to any new discrimination or reproduce existing discrimination. Because having an inclusive workforce, as we also learned a bit earlier today, is also, of course, part of rights and part of fundamental rights. And many countries have also specific inclusive workforce regulations that take all these personal parameters, socioeconomic backgrounds into account, trying to ensure that people don't have an unfair advantage, for example, when applying for a job. So who are standing a bit in front of other people when you are assessing a lot of CVs, to put it a bit simply. But what we are very concerned about in the bias project is how we can ensure that AI does not reproduce human biases, as we have seen there are quite a lot of, or invent new forms of discrimination for job seekers when we are testing and using new technologies. And as you have seen from the wonderful workshop we have been part of today, we have a very interdisciplinary focus. So we focus on the social, legal, and technical perspectives and solutions of especially fairness. And I would say in our project, we really try to make this interdisciplinary knowledge building work. So even though I come more from the social sciences, and my PhD student Sylvia presented yesterday on that, we also have legal experts in the project with Edward Foss-Villaronga, who will also be part of the roundtable afterwards. And we also had wonderful technical presentations yesterday from my colleagues Alex and Catherine, who are also trying together with us to build good knowledge on how we can understand this. But as I'm also a teacher, I wanted to just take a little bit step back and understand how do we work between disciplines, because we have these wonderful keywords of interdisciplinarity, but how can we really put that into practice? And sorry, this is the social scientist just putting this point out. So of course we work within our own disciplines. We try to work multidisciplinary between disciplines, and this is, I would say, most of the time we try to translate between our disciplines, but of course we speak very different disciplinary languages. So just coming together to build knowledge is quite the task. So of course our goal is to have good interdisciplinary connections to really try to understand each other. So I'm very happy that several of you were also part of the workshops yesterday, where we really try to bring you all together. And of course the really hairy goal is to get the transdisciplinary knowledge, where we really meld our knowledge together to get to new knowledge. But as you can see, it's quite complex to get that to happen. So I encourage everyone to have a bit of an open mind when you meet someone with a very different disciplinary background than yourself. But this is something we're focusing quite a lot on in our project. So I wanted to bring you some preliminary results that we have from the bias project. So one of the things we have been focusing on is more quantitative data. So we had a survey with over 4,000 workers across Europe, answer questions concerning perception, experience of AI and work. As we learned from the morning session, of course, surveys are quite tricky, but we do try to then engage our survey findings also with good qualitative work. So we have over 200 in-depth interviews with workers across Europe, with HR managers, AI developers, and also we've had long-term site visits in companies and organizations using AI at work, which we have just concluded. We also have co-creation and capacity building workshops, where we try to also engage the HR and AI community in particular about this, to figure out what does HR expertise really mean, and how do they understand an AI system, and how can we build on this knowledge to make people more aware of what AI actually does when you apply to a lot of CVs, for example. And we also have, as was mentioned yesterday, our proof of concept NLP and CBR engine for identifying and mitigating using real world and synthetic data, focusing on non-English languages, which we are also happy to discuss with you. But I think what we are seeing is that all these points of knowledge are leading back to the black box. And we are really seeing that AI systems are, of course, reproducing human biases if we are not aware of both the data that comes into the black box, how AI systems are really working on the inside. But especially for me as a social scientist, I think it's very interesting to see what comes out of the black box. So how do we interpret the recommendations or findings that AI gives us? And this is something I'm very interested to see with the HR community, because most of the HR people we are speaking to, they're really interested in how AI can help their work, but they don't necessarily understand it that well. So that's part of the capacity we want to build with them. I'm glad the Amazon example was mentioned earlier today, because it's, of course, a classic example now of how AI can discriminate people applying for a job, where you have this very gender division of mostly male tech companies feeding that data into recommendation systems that then recommend to not hire as many women. And this reitifies that some patterns are not explicitly visible to us humans, but can be picked up by AI and then further reproduced in the systems. And I wanted to show a little bit about what we are doing from the bias side. So right now we are having some capacity building workshops across Europe, where we are using all the knowledge we have gathered from all these different disciplinary sources. So to give you a very concrete example, we might have a job applicant letter that says something like, thank you for reading my application. I have extensive experience in software development, which is the job here. In my spare time, I enjoy knitting and yoga. Of course, if you are a human evaluator, you might think, oh, how nice, yoga, that's really positive. You must be very mindful, for example. But how do an AI system understand the keyword yoga here? That's something we initially were very curious about. So what we can see from the data we have collected is that knitting and yoga can really point to the here personal characteristic of being a woman that can then further be used by systems to make unfair decisions if it is inferring a lot from these hobbies. Another example that we see in Norway is that a lot of people write that they like to go skiing on their spare time, on their CVs, and then you have people moving into Norway that have never learned how to ski, but then immediately make themselves different than the majority population, to give you a bit of a banal example. And here further in the example, we have years of activist engagement, having grown up in an underprivileged black community, can also be picked up by the system. So how do we find good ways of helping AI systems interpreting this? So one of the things we're now testing out with our HR communities is giving recommendations, but also with explanations of how they can better understand the text that comes in. For example, here, the candidate has previous experience with software development and is an activist, which matches well with the given job positioning. So we're still in the testing phase of how we can make this work the best. But when we try to translate the knowledge back to our HR community, we do see that they need good reasonings. Why should an AI system recommend this particular candidate? So they want to know why. Other work we are doing and finishing up our analysis of now is the qualitative observation studies. So in Norway, we have had a PhD candidate with a team focusing on AI worker management systems, keeping track on how employees perform with Dillis. I'm not sure, are you here today, Dillis? No. In Norway, we have a focus on how employers and job seekers negotiate AI use in recruitment processes with Shan. Are you here, Shan? No, my PhDs. Yeah, they're enjoying their day in Barcelona. And in the Netherlands, we have a particular focus on immigrant job seekers. And as you might have heard yesterday, in Italy, we have a focus on the imaginary benefits and focus of AI, which my PhD student, Silvia Ecclesia, was presenting yesterday. So I was going to encourage you to go up and talk to them during the break, but hopefully they will come back. Or you can, of course, email us. But to round off my presentation with some questions for us, when someone applies for a job, how can we make sure that the right person gets the job and ensure a fair hiring process? And as you might have seen from our cluster, we are very concerned about fairness, and I really liked the keynotes this morning that were also discussing fairness in different matters. But in our project, we have had a lot of discussions of what is really fairness, because we see this really difference from computer scientists who want a quite simple answer, and then us from science and technology studies that want a more epistemic discussion of what fairness can mean. But one thing that I often come back to is this very overused, I would say, example of how different people are perceiving here a sport match, where we have this illustration of reality, where some people gets more than what is needed. So we have the person on the left standing on a lot of boxes, having a very good view of the match happening, and the person in the middle just barely being able to see, and then the person on the right not giving anything. Then to illustrate equality, we see what happens if we give everyone a box. Of course, that doesn't solve the problem for everyone. Further, we can see if we focus on equity, supporting everyone with what they need, producing more an equitable situation. But then often we want to go a little bit beyond this, of course. So, for example, focusing on an impartial representation where we remove the systemic barriers altogether, or even going a further step to inclusion where everyone is included and more involved in what's happening. So here it's illustrated by people having sports equipment. We're going to make a nice bias-focused illustration of this, and this illustration has been quite criticized by who are involved in this, why are there boxes. I'm not going to go into that, but happy to discuss it during the lunch, and if anyone have good suggestions of how we can illustrate these differences between equality, equity, and inclusion, I'm also very happy to take that. But what we often see with the concept of fairness is that when we talk about automated recruitment, we really need to discuss what does fairness mean, because we see that there are different disciplinary understandings of fairness. There are also different socio-cultural understandings. What is fair here in Barcelona might be quite different than what's fair for us back in Norway. And we also see that fairness for individuals might differ for fairness for a company, or fairness for a minority group, or fairness for society. A good example here is when you are, so for everyone who has been on the hiring side of the table, how are you supposed to hire for these typical diversity hires? Are you supposed to have a diverse team, a diverse department, a diverse faculty, a diverse university? Like, what level should you place your criteria on? That's really complicated, and something that HR people are also really struggling with. Like, where do they place their fairness criteria? In our project, we look at both procedural fairness for individuals, and that was a big topic of yesterday, so that similar candidates are treated in a similar way, as we also heard this morning. But we also focus on a more larger focus on how AI treats minority groups. But what we're seeing is that what is considered fairness is quite dependent on individual use cases. So we work quite closely with companies and organizations when we're trying to figure this out with them. So since we don't have that much time, I want to point you to some of our further events. So if you're interested in coding, we have an interesting coding school in Tallinn now in April. And we also have capacity building workshops in all the partner countries happening this spring and also in the fall. And you're welcome to scan our QR code here or visit our website if you want to learn more. And I'm happy to take a couple of questions while the next presenter, Chato, sets up your presentation. So are there any questions? I see one over here.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a lot of questions, but let me have one question. From the Netherlands, I'm doing a lot of research when it comes to labor markets, and I think labor market is extremely difficult to understand in a way. I was just wondering if you are also looking into skills, like within the recruitment, and what is your findings in there?
Yeah, thank you for the good question. So so I understand it, so we are both looking into AI-specific skills, but were you thinking of more general skills of the person applying for a job?
Yeah, what I mean is that like skills. I think the difficulty with AI system is that understanding certain words. People are writing in a certain way of their resume, but also the lack of the vacancy, the quality of the vacancy, which is not always good for an AI model to interpret the right words, which is somehow the mismatch is not working out very good. But at the other side, also understanding how the skills are related to one another. Not everyone has all of the skills, but I was just wondering if you have any research done with that, because we in the Netherlands, we have certain occupations that are very difficult to fulfill. So the employer needs to think in a different way, but there comes another way of thinking. And there are people, they want to work in a way for that kind of occupation, but they're not selected because they don't have the right skill set or the right combination of skill sets. And when you sit down with them on the table, the employer, and explain them, like, why did you not choose that? Then they try to understand, but the AI system is not really in like understanding good what the relation is between skills, because it's about words. So I was just wondering if you did any research in that.
Yeah, thank you. So for skills, I think we have both the objective and the subjective issue here. So of course, objectively, if a person has a certificate, for example, for skills in a given language, then it can be checked off in a box. But we also have the historic bias of self-assessment being very objective. So research, for example, pointing to men overestimating their skill level and women underplaying their skill level. What we're seeing with our testing for skills is that when we put skills as ranking parameters, HR experts, they are not so sure about what a certain skill entails. So of course you can say that you are skilled in, do you have an example of a job, for example?
I will say I'm a data scientist and I'm skilled in Python.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So then I think the question for the HR person would be, do you assess that as a yes or no, or do you have a gradual skill level? So is it yes, I know Python, or no, I don't know Python, or is it I have a certain proficiency in it? But that, again, has to be ranked together with all the other parts of the job applicants. So I'm happy to discuss further with you how we assess skills as part of that whole, but a bit complex too.
It is.
But
The labor market is very difficult in a way. Thank you very much.
Well, one thing I just wanted to mention is that we do prioritize a lot of unions into our works. So they often have trade unions. They have a lot of input on what skills do they deem as important, and also for further education.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're... Are we running out of time? Yeah, sorry, I think we are running out of time. Thanks.